Something bad happened to Agnes, but life goes on for everyone else. When a beloved friend on the brink of a major milestone visits, Agnes starts to realize just how stuck she's been and begins to work through how to move forward. Sorry Baby is directed and written by Eva Victor. It stars Eva Victor, along with Naomi, Ackie, Lucas Hedges, and many more. So Jeffrey, what do you think about Sorry Baby?
Okay, so this is the first film by Eva Victor, who I understand is an online comedian. Some of their videos have gone viral on Twitter and on TikTok. They've guest starred on some TV work, although this is their first foray into screenwriting and directing that I'm aware of, or certainly for the big screen. Sorry Baby, I think, is a mostly wonderful film that really juggles different tones with an extraordinary amount of precision, which is interesting because I would not really describe this film as precise. Like, it's able to navigate wildly divergent tones within single scenes, but I think its success comes more from its devotion to raw authenticity, both in its humor and its emotional intimacy, both of which are some of the more confrontational I've seen in a film lately. I said the word confrontational to you earlier, and I don't mean that the character themselves is confrontational, although they are confrontational with themselves in a certain way. But I think the film is confrontational in terms of what it is trying to reckon with. And that's kind of like what I meant when I used the word confrontational, because I think this film is really getting at something quite real. The film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. Sundance has such an archetype, or at least like a few different archetypes that come up again and again when we're talking about Sundance films. And this film fits into the humanistic dramedy type of archetype. Also, there's this type of film that Sundance loves where a character has a secret that's very gradually revealed throughout the film. And it's usually revealed right at the end. However, regarding the first part of that, I think this film is much sharper written than many Sundance comedies I've seen. And for the second part of that, I think the film shows indication that something is amiss in the first chapter before showing us really what happened in the second chapter, which is really interesting. Many films, especially films at Sundance, would withhold this information for the entire runtime, and I'm very, very glad this film does not, because often the trauma is used more as a punctuation than it is something used as like a springboard to a conversation topic, which is, I think, what this film is trying to do. I almost wondered if Eva Victor had seen a lot of Sundance films themselves and perhaps took some lessons from them. Either way, those are some stray observations, but this is among the more funny and interesting and, again, confrontational films I've seen this year, and has a tremendous amount of emotional tenderness, even when it's exploring its dark side.
Yeah, I completely agree. This was both such a heart-wrenching film to watch as well as a heartwarming film to watch. Eva Victor, as you were talking about, has this miraculous balance of tones in this film. They seamlessly move from these tones of humor to pain to horror without ever feel like you're being dragged along to different movies entirely. The film is so good at patiently building out its themes to this really great effect at the end. So I love that you said that what she's experienced in this film, which we won't talk about until the spoiler section, we don't really have to wait too long to figure out what that was. But you mentioned a little bit, this movie is built into chapters, and those chapters highlight different aspects of Agnes's life during this time. Starting with Agnes as a character, I just thought she was absolutely fantastic. I want to tap into a little bit of what you were saying, because she is so honest and blunt regardless of the person who she's talking to, which in the film is such a stark contrast to some of the characters that she comes across, whose interactions come across as maybe manicured or stilted. They're almost like computer-like is the best way I could describe them. They feel like they're reading from a script, and she immediately slices through that inauthenticity with just her truth.
The film is really, really realistic in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it borders on farce in the way that other outsider people talk to our main characters, but I don't think it's in a way that's very unrealistic. Let's put it that way. Like I said in the opening, that I found the film to be really confrontational, and one of the ways this is confrontational is within its humor. So there's this great bit in the courtroom where she talks about how her friends would describe her, and she says that they would describe her as tall.
Yeah.
Which is really funny. So there's an honesty in so many of the jokes that it's hard to remember them all, but I remember really fondly a lot of the jokes that are in the middle section. There's one after what happens with her that she goes to see a doctor, and she's having all this anxiety about whether she should have taken off all her clothes to be naked under the gown. That's an anxiety that is very relatable, because I felt that way before when I go to the doctor. I'm like, nobody told me I'm supposed to get naked or not. So the doctor comes in and she immediately blurts out I'm naked under the gown. So there's an authenticity and, again, a confrontation in the humor that I think is so relatable. It's almost like the fact that all of the uncertainty is in the air is giving her anxiety, so she just needs to quell it as soon as possible. And I totally understand that compulsion.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And one of the things on top of that with that humor is that sometimes you don't know, and you had mentioned this in the theater, I wasn't sure whether to laugh or just be sad by the humor, because in many times it's multifaceted.
Yeah,
she's saying something
totally.
that comes across very funny, but there's this deep issue with the joke as well.
Yeah, and that scene is, I know we'll talk about this scene later, but that scene is following the scene in the doctor scene is the scene following the scene in the bathtub.
Yes.
Which is really emotionally wrenching. To like ease you into the pain of laughing it off is an interesting experience. But again, I kind of like the discomfort that she's giving me in terms of should I laugh or should I not? Because to me, it goes back to that confrontation. And it goes back to us talking about uncharted territory within these films.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to jump back a little bit to the actors because I had briefly mentioned Eva Victor as Agnes. And so I want to talk about Naomi Ackie as Liddy. We recently saw her in Mickey 17. She was great in that film, and she's great in this film as well. She plays Agnes's roommate during college, as well as a friend that comes back. So our first scene, I would say, this first chapter, without giving too much away, is basically Liddy visiting Agnes at her home. And they're just hanging out. They're just having a good time doing stuff, rekindling their friendship as Liddy has moved away and she lives in the city now. Liddy just plays this character that is so compassionate and warm and kind. And she's just everything that Agnes really needs during this difficult time, because she's just understanding, but she doesn't treat her like she's broken, which I think is just extremely important for a film like this. And it's also one of the biggest messages I think the film has. The people that she gets along with best are the people that treat her with authenticity, realness, and don't treat her as if she's broken. They treat her as if she went through something and she experienced something, but there's life beyond this experience for her. And she's more than that experience.
Yeah, completely. And you're talking about the structure of this film, which is really interesting. So if we were to take the film chronologically, say this is it chronologically, right? We start here. And then we go back here, and it goes chronologically until we get to here again, and then it shows us the very end. And I thought that was brilliant because, again, here there are some details and some little indications that something is amiss. There's this running creepiness. I'm not sure what we want to call it, but...
I'm going to talk about that in a little bit if you want.
Oh, you will? Okay, all right, cool. Let's just say that there's some details that are amiss in this chapter.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't make us wait the entire film to understand what that's about.
Yeah.
So we go back to this chapter, the beginning, and we understand what happens to Agnes. And then that starts the conversation of how do we heal from trauma? I think that's a really brilliant way to do it because, as I was alluding to in like the opening, in my opening, so many of these Sundance films or so many independent films, and I understand why they do this, but so many of them use The Secret as a punctuation mark, and it really should be an opening to talk about these things further. And I think that this film is an invitation to think about these things in a really nuanced, but also very emotionally tender and interesting way.
I completely agree. It's actually one of the reasons I really enjoyed Shada from a few years ago, because I felt like it did the same thing. On top of what you were talking about with this early portion of the film, we are introduced to Lucas Hedges' character of Gavin during this time. And this is just a quick moment, which is also hilarious in its own right, because he just shows up at the front door. And so Agnes was really awkward about it. And so after the door closes, that's when Lydia is just like, oh, you're doing something with him.
Can I just say, it's so nice to see Lucas Hedges in a film. I was actually reading about this in regard to this film, but he felt like he got too famous too fast and he needed to take a breather because he's an artist and he's an actor. He wants to do theater. He wants to do things that compel him. And it's just really nice to see him acting again, because I feel like he's a tremendous actor and he has such a heartfelt presence.
Yeah, no, he is so naturally endearing and his facial expressions are so innocent that you can't look at the guy and just think something nefarious of him.
Again, his innocence is part of the confrontation of the film, because there's a point where she was like, will you come sleep with me? And he has this deliberation of if he needs shoes or not. Yeah. That's so funny and so cute.
Yeah, that makes him like so disarming, which is so necessary to the growth of Agnes's character going forward. So all these characters just have such a beautiful role in this film and a purpose, which is one of the reasons I loved it so much.
I want to say too about the structure of the film, that the film is very smart about these little details that lets us know where we are in the chronology. So whether it's Agnes's best friend and where she is in her relationship, or she has a pregnancy towards the end of the film that's broken up between the chapters, all of those little things, all those little details really help us know where we are in the story. And I thought that was very like naturally done in a way that I don't often see in films. A lot of times that's very forced. So really good screenwriting there.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in terms of the what I would call horror-like elements of the film. It's either this shot on a door, at night, that is just sitting there with this tense audio in the background.
And really arresting sequences, I have to say, like very enveloping.
Not only just that with the door, but there's that looking through a window into the darkness. And there's also this repetitive creaking that's happening in the house, in which Agnes thinks that somebody is outside and she's constantly checking the front door. So these horror elements, they're being utilized to, I think, a really great effect because they're displaying this fear that she has, this fear that something is lurking outside, that something is coming for her. And this is really important to what we find out later about their character and what they've experienced. So from here, I would really love to get into some more specifics about the film, which include spoilers. So if you have not seen Sorry Baby, I recommend checking out the film and then coming back to see this review. From here, I want to talk about the beautiful way in which this film highlights these absurd elements of dealing with these grim realities that Agnes has experienced. We were talking a little bit earlier about this doctor sequence. So the doctor is just so void of any emotion. It's like he's going through a checklist of
He's literally clinical.
Yeah, he's so clinical to a fault where he's not really taking the time to look at this through a humanistic perspective. At one point, he literally tells her what she should have done. And she's just like, well, I've never been through this before. How would I know that I was supposed to go to the police? And then I was immediately supposed to go to the emergency room, and that they were capable of doing these cultures that would have said everything that we needed to know and give us evidence. Like a person that has never experienced that before would not know that all these things are available or what to do.
Not to mention, there's a nice way of saying all of those things.
Yes.
You can equivocate and you could say, you can be honest about the expectations if this person is expected to press charges against this person. But at the same time, this doctor takes a perspective that's very blamey. I can really imagine is the case a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And probably unwittingly so. This doctor's probably not a bad person, but he's dealt with this so many times that he becomes numb to it, and he forgets that the person in front of him is dealing with this in a way that's very real.
And this also happens with a scene in which Agnes is talking to two of the women that work at the university. We haven't mentioned just quite yet, but if you've seen the film and you've already made it this far, you'll be aware that Agnes is dealing with being raped and sexually assaulted by her professor. She's having a conversation with the two women who work at the university, which it's crazy how it comes across funny. And I don't know how to describe it unless you've seen it, but it comes across funny because it's just so ridiculous how the women point out that, oh, we're women, we understand, as they say it in such a, I don't know, the coldest tone imaginable with so little emotion whatsoever.
Especially in like the Me Too era and how we've become much more aware of these things, there's a perfunctory, almost like corporatized way that people approach this, where they have to appear like they're doing their due diligence, but at the same time, they're not really doing anything at all.
Yeah, and the reason here is because anything that they say could make the university complicit and make them liable, I think. So that's why they're being this corporate speak. And that's just so true to think about like all the videos you've seen of like somebody being fired and just like the corporate words that they use for it as to not implicate or show any fault and for the reason that they're firing the person or to absolve themselves of any personal responsibility.
Are you on like firing people TikTok? I haven't seen them.
I haven't seen them in a while, but I was on for a little bit.
I could imagine what you're talking about, but I haven't directly seen it.
No, you should, because this is like verbatim, like things that happen.
I mean, I've seen Up in the Air, and I know they like fire people professionally. But
no, it's absolutely realistic. So it's crazy how, and we were talking about tone and how she balances these tones. It's real, it's painful, it's hilarious because of how real and painful it is. It's just a miraculous balance of tones. But going from here, I do want to talk about the authentic encounter she has, because there's an absolute beautiful sequence with the sandwich shop owner. She's experiencing this panic attack in the car, and she has to quickly pull over.
Scene broke me, and I'm so cold. I'm like so cold-hearted in my old age, and I was just like watching this, feeling so lovely.
But here you have a man who doesn't know who Agnes is. She rolls down her window. He's like kind of taken back for a moment there. But then when he realizes what's happening, he really guides her through this panic attack, helping her breathe, then makes her a sandwich, even though the place is closed.
One of my favorite things about this guy is he's very sympathetic towards her, and he says, my son Hank gets these as well, and he coaches her through it. And then later in the conversation, he just offhandedly says Hank is an asshole.
Yeah. It's really good. It's really good. And that goes to speaking about the humor as well as the seriousness, because they're having a serious conversation. Going from there, I want to talk about one of my other authentic moments of the film that I just found to be very powerful. And that's as the film is progressing, we see that Agnes's relationship to Gavin is further explored. And we get to see kind of where we ended up at the beginning in a way. And this segment includes a scene where Agnes goes and gets Gavin. They have their little fun time, their romp. She is in the bathtub and he comes into the bathtub. It's kind of funny because he's asking to use the toilet. So he's just like, can I pee?
Yeah, she also insults his penis.
Yes. She says it looks like that.
If I didn't know someone that well and I had just slept with them and they did that to me, I would feel so bad, even if they were joking.
But at the same time, she said, I really like it that way. She said, I prefer it that way. So she kind of like jokingly insulted it, but as well made up for it, I think. But anyways, the scene is so beautiful and poignant because it really speaks to her progression. And this scene is difficult because you see this hesitancy in her. There's a moment where Gavin asks if he could join her in the tub, and you see her hesitantly say yes. And then there's a moment where he asks, like, it's a little uncomfortable here. Can I come up behind you to make it more comfortable? And she hesitates at that point too. But her willingness to give it a try is such a leap of faith to progressing from what she experienced. And it's her ability to find comfort in somebody and sexual intimacy and intimacy that's not sexual, that was corrupted by her experience with her professor. This whole scene is like a rebuilding of trust for her. It's a way for her to find solace in somebody else that is more than just a friend. And I think that is just super important to her well-being and her moving forward.
Yeah, the unfortunate truth of, I think, this assault is that because it was a prominent person in her life, it proliferates so much of her life. Like, she presumably got her advanced degree in English because of her thesis, which he was the advisor on. She teaches at the same university that he used to teach at and is now in the same office. There are ways in which this assault is unfortunately going to haunt her for the rest of her life. And to whatever degree she can find intimacy or she can find ways to heal from it that separate her from that proliferation is really important. I think the film is showing that in ways that are both really heartwarming, but also understandably heart-wrenching.
Yeah, there's a particular moment that goes throughout the film and has to do with a particular word that was in her thesis. I'm trying to think what he wrote.
Extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
And this word comes back again and again whenever it's referred to her as extraordinary, because all she can think about is how he said it.
There's a lot of literary references in the film too, and you don't necessarily have to understand the references to like the film, but when she's teaching Lolita, there's a clear discomfort because the main character in that novel is taking advantage of someone sexually the entire novel, and it's a really hard novel to read. It's extraordinarily written, and actually she has an exchange with a student where she talks about how his feelings of disgust are kind of the point of the writing. That's another way to show that her life will continually be informed by this experience, even when she's teaching a book that's of like very sexually explicit subject matter.
I did notice throughout the film there were certain literary references that you totally got because I saw you physically react to them.
Well, there's a point.
And I was like, I don't know what he's reacting
there's
to.
a point
but I
where
guess
Naomi Ackie literally just opens Lolita to a random page and it just goes, ew. And that's how I felt the whole time I read the book. And it's like one of the best books that's ever been written, but it's also like, I can never read a word of it again.
Anyways, so going to the end of the film, we have Naomi Akkie's character coming back into the picture, and she comes over with her wife and their child. A beautiful scene right at the end where she is left with the baby, so the two can go off to on some kind of hike or something like that. I forget where they're going, but it doesn't
They're
really
going to
matter.
the lighthouse, I think?
Oh, the lighthouse. Yes, that's right. And so basically Agnes is left with this child, and I found this scene very interesting because it's the first time we see that there is like a little greenhouse attached to the house.
Yes. Are you going to talk about the same thing I'm going to talk
Oh my
about?
gosh.
We're going to see.
I'll let you say it because you'll probably say it better than I am. I'm just going to say I found that really interesting that the first time we go into a space that has a lot of natural light and plants and life is in this part that we just hadn't seen before at all in this house. So
Well, I'm roughly on the same wavelength in terms of there's a fear of windows and doorways in this film, and there's some idea of her facing her fear going into the greenhouse, which is only windows, right? So it's as if she is like the windows and the things that scare her are surrounding her entirely, and she's able to confidently give this healing language towards another being, right?
I didn't think about that, but also the way that the windows are completely exposing of her, like anybody could see her.
Yes,
Anybody can have access
And remember,
to her.
she in a very interesting symbolic scene took her thesis and literally like
Covered the
like
window.
covered the window.
Yeah.
With it. So like windows are clearly a thing in this movie. This is a strange reference, but like the end of The Squid and the Whale. Like when Jesse Eisenberg's character talks about how scared he was of the whale and he goes back and he just unblinkingly stares at it, to me reminds me so much of the way that this film ends, which she's scared of what the windows represent and what the doors represent, that she's now literally surrounded by
Gosh.
windows, able to be healed.
Well, thank you for expanding on that because I had this basic understanding. Like I knew it was interesting. I knew there was like a greenhouse is filled with like life and light and like access to outside. So I just thought those things, but I didn't.
Yeah, the
really
movie also
understand
shows you sunlight for like the first time.
Yeah.
So it's like notable in the visual palette.
But this is also where the ending pretty much hits this literal meaning of its title with Sorry Baby, because she's talking to the baby and she's being very real and honest. She's like, I'm sorry because you're going to experience hardship in your life. Bad things are going to happen to you, but I'm going to be here for you and I'm going to listen to you. And so if you ever have a terrible thought, if you ever feel bad, if something ever happens to you, you could come to me and I will be somebody for you. And so I think that just beautiful. Oh my gosh, sorry. I have to hold it together, but it just so beautifully brings the meaning of the film together, and I think ties in what all these characters, these important authentic characters to her, such as her friends, and with Gavin's character, just like what they mean to her. This moment I think is just really raw, it's really real, it's just a perfect ending to the film, I think.
It also does the thing that I think, which is one of my favorite things in films, that it ends at its strongest moment.
So you ready to go to grades?
Yes, I'm going to give this an A-. I thought it was lovely. A lot of films that have the same sort of beats and the same sort of structure and are going after the same subject matter, it's like so clear, the ones that are really great from the ones that aren't so great. And it's not so much the subject matter that makes them great or not great, but it's so much the execution. This film is executed so well, and it's so funny. It sounds strange because of how deep our conversation was, but like this is probably one of the funniest movies of the year. I was laughing far more often than I was crying in this movie. At the same time, gets at something that's extremely real. The nature of which it goes about these things is quintessentially like Sundance and quintessentially indie, but it gets so much deeper than so many filmmakers are willing to go or like perhaps can think to go. We already made our like best films of the year so far, but if we had made it a week or two later, I probably would have included this.
Yeah,
I think this is a lovely film. And when we sat down, you're like, I know nothing about this movie, so I'm really interested to hear your like final thoughts and if you thought it was worthwhile.
Well, it's crazy because you basically stole my final thoughts in what I just said. It's
Oh,
like
sorry.
Exactly what I had written down.
Yeah.
But I completely agree. I think it's such a worthwhile watch. And I give it an A-, but I am teetering a little bit with an A. Maybe if this movie stays in my head, maybe down the line I'll have something to say about that. But I thought it was just a very clear and intentional film. I think Eva Victor put so much thought into how this narrative was going to build over the course of the movie with the chapters. I love the way they were titled. Like one has to do with the sandwich and one has to do like with what happened. So it's very blunt and like, oh, we're about to find out.
The one with the baby.
Yeah.
One
and
before
with
the baby.
Yeah. It's very on the nose with its titles because this movie isn't meant to hide anything from you. I think that's one of the important messages of the film, as we talked about with Agnes's character. It's just this film is going to be very honest with you and very real with you, and do it with some heart, some humor. And I just think that's all you could really ask for with a movie like this. So I don't know. I just really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. It actually reminded me quite a bit of I May Destroy You. Remember that HBO series?
Yeah, that was great.
That was great, and that was really funny, but also really, really astute and just well observed. It reminded me a lot of like a compressed version of that.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there are a lot of comparisons to that.
Yeah.
That's a great one to bring up.
Thank you. Also, everyone should watch that. I feel like it's kind of forgotten and won some Emmys and stuff, but like
fantastic show.
Literally one of the best miniseries ever made. I'm like going on record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so that's our review of Sorry Baby. Sorry Baby is now in theaters for a limited time only, so if you haven't seen it, go rush and check it out. It's well worth the watch. Let us know in the comments, what did you think about Sorry Baby? As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.